Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, no matter where you're tuning in from and the time of day. Welcome to another episode of The Digital Deck. My name is Antonio Holder, and I am the founder of Kids Digital Wellness and the inventor of the DigiRoo case, the world's first height adjustable tablet case. I am so excited to have you with us this afternoon for our wonderful conversation with one of my friends and longtime advocate for kids in the digital wellness space, Dr. Katie Davis. I am going to read a snippet of her bio and then I'll bring her on and we're going to chat and have a good time. Dr. Katie Davis is Associate Professor at the University of Washington and Director of the UW Digital Youth Lab. For nearly 20 years, she has been researching the impact of digital technologies on young people's learning, development, and well-being. Dr. Davis has published more than 70 academic publications and is the author of 3 books exploring technology's role in young people's lives. In her latest book, which I can't wait to dig into, Technology's Child, Digital Media's Role in the Ages and Stages of Growing Up, she brings clarity to what we know about technology's role in child development and provides guidance on how to help children of all ages make the most of their digital experiences. Let's welcome Dr. Katie Davis.
Hi, Antonia. So good to see you.
Wonderful to have you here. Thank you so much for your time.
Of course, it's my pleasure. Thank you for the invitation.
Yes, and we go back a couple years now, and I've
Yeah.
had the opportunity to chat with you one-on-one on your journey and attend one of your lectures, which was phenomenal. And so now you're here today to sort of drop some of those gems in for our audience. Why don't you start by sort of giving a quick summary of who you are and what you do and sort of what led you to the space you're in now?
Sure. So, what leads me to this topic of kids and technology was my experience as a teacher here in Bermuda. I grew up in Bermuda and I attended school, and then I came back to be a teacher for a few years. And I was a teacher at Saltus, and this was in the early to mid 2000s. And it was just becoming very clear then that technology was becoming increasingly central to my students' lives, both inside the classroom and outside the classroom. So I decided that I really wanted to understand this better. How are the new technologies shaping our children and how they develop and how they understand themselves and the world around them? So I decided to go back to school and study that topic. And I've been doing that ever since. So that's how I come to it, is actually by way of Bermuda.
Wow, that is quite a full circle moment because you don't live here anymore and you are studying and continuing your studies and research publications overseas at the University of Washington. Can you tell us sort of the research that you're doing with the sample size of kids that you get to see and listen to and teach? Is it much different from Bermuda?
Well, it's interesting because I did my doctoral research in Bermuda, and this was in 2010. And the themes that I found in that study, I actually went into all of the senior schools in Bermuda and conducted a big survey. So there are over 2,000 teens who responded to the survey, which was very
Wow.
close to all of our teens in Bermuda. And the kinds of themes that I pulled from that and saw about their relationship to social media and other technologies is actually very similar to a lot of the experiences that have been documented by other researchers and also my subsequent research in the United States and other countries like the UK and European countries as well. I think that there are a lot of commonalities between the experience of Bermuda's children and youth and then the experiences in other countries, which is good because that means that we can use the research that's published in other countries to try and make sense of what the youth in Bermuda are experiencing.
you've been doing this research for decades, and you now have a son of your own.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
that really changes things when you have your own kid. I have to admit, so Oliver is 6. And before I had him, when people would ask me what I do, and they would say, well, okay, so what is it? Is technology good or is it bad for kids? And I would go into this long explanation of, well, sometimes it can be good, sometimes it can be bad. And I realized once I had a kid that that kind of an answer isn't particularly helpful for parents who just want to know, how many episodes of my kid's favorite TV show should I let them watch? When should
Oh,
I
yeah.
get them a phone? And all of these things. So that was actually really the motivation for me to write my latest book, Technology's Child, is to try and bring all that complexity, because the research is complex and it's unfortunately not as clear cut as we would hope it would be. But I wanted to bring that complexity and distill it into some concrete guidance and takeaways for parents, teachers, anybody who has kids in their lives. So that was my goal with this book.
And the book is phenomenal. I've had the chance to read
Oh,
it.
wonderful. You have it.
Technically, this will be your 4th baby, right? Because you've written 3 books and you have Oliver.
Right. That's right. This is my 4th baby. Yeah, good job.
And so you would say that after the parents coming to you and caregivers coming to you for advice based on all your research, it was the catalyst for you sort of putting in like a process that we can sort of follow, a checklist, so to speak, of some of the things that we should be paying attention to, avoiding, and understanding, because it's not just the form of technology, right? The whole ecosystem of sort of the issues, the benefits, and the negative side of technology is that you have the people who are behind the software and designs and gaming. Then you have the parent of the young child who is meant to be the gatekeeper. Then you have the child, and as the child grows themselves, who has to understand what to look for, what to avoid. And so with that being the catalyst for you, thank you for creating such a wonderful resource for us, which I have sort of poked through numerous times since, we connected last year on it. Can you share maybe a couple of points that you would want our viewers to really take away without giving away too much? Because we want you to go and buy the book, guys. Head over to Amazon and grab Technology's Child. I promise you won't be disappointed. But can you just summarize for us a couple of points that you think would be a great place to start?
Yes, absolutely. So the first takeaway, I think, from the book, or the first thing to know, is that the book actually goes from, it covers the full arc of child development. So from toddlers all the way up to emerging adults who are in college or at that college age. And so really anybody who has a kid of any age can get something from it. But so what I was trying to do here was try and think about, well, kids at 2 and 12 and 22, they're very different. They have different abilities, they have different interests. What can we pull out that kind of can give us some sort of a guidepost that helps us to support kids at different ages and stages of their development? And so what I developed was this very simple 2-step framework that parents can use to make concrete decisions in the moment about, anything to do with technology. This framework consists of asking yourself 2 questions. So the first question is this experience that my child is having self-directed? And by self-directed, I mean experiences with technology where your child is in the driver's seat. They have control over their attention. They're steering their technology use according to what they want to do, the creativity that they want to express, and so on. In contrast, a lot of technology experiences for kids often place the technology more in control, and the technology starts to co-opt kids' attention so that they're kind of being pulled from one thing to the next, whether they're playing a game or watching a show or scrolling through their social media feed. So that's the first thing is it self-directed? And we can come back to that. But I want to also just say the second question is really key also, because an important point that I want to get across, and you kind of touched on this when you were setting it up, is that it's not just single kids and technology. There's a whole ecosystem around kids. And so the second question really gets at that ecosystem, and it's asking, is this experience community supported? And so by community supported, I mean experiences where kids are being supported surrounding their technology. So if you think about a young child who's engaging in a literacy app, maybe their parent is looking over their shoulder and engaging with them. Maybe with a teen who's on social media, their parents probably aren't looking over their shoulder so much, but perhaps asking them questions and really providing them some support in that way through conversation. And so the community support is a really key piece. Kids can't do this alone. They need some support. They need guidance, whether that's from parents or teachers, sometimes even their friends. And also, I argue in the book, it should also be coming from government policies and the technology companies themselves, although that's really tricky and challenging territory.
Yes, as we know, trying to see some of the changes come through with the Instagram and TikTok algorithms. I followed that very closely. And you had mentioned that sort of in the first part of the stat, which is this experience self-directed? And for those who may not know, the algorithm for the scrolling sort of requirements, once the child clicks on a particular game or a photo or video, then the algorithm is going to continue to show them games, videos, and photos that are similar to that. And if you can just go back to step one of your two-step approach in sort of the framework for regulating, can you give an example of sort of a program or game that is self-directed versus one that is not?
Sure. And also, I think there it's important to note that it's not so much that a particular platform or game itself is or is not self-directed or allows for kids to be self-directed, because kids are very different and they come with different abilities and attention spans and concerns and values to a particular tech experience. So what's self-directed for one kid might not be so much for another. But there are certain, design features of these platforms and games that are more or less lend themselves to a self-directed experience. And so generally what you want to look for are experiences that are open-ended. So if we think about young kids, there's some good examples for young children where, so when Oliver was younger, 3 and 4, he loved a drawing app that was based on Peppa Pig. And so it was Peppa's Paint Box. And this drawing app was great. I felt good about letting him use this because he would open up the app and go immediately to a blank canvas, and he could choose his painting implements or drawing implements. He could choose the color, and he really could do whatever he wanted with this app. And then he could also decide when he was done and then just kind of leave. And Peppa was fine. She did not take any offense to that. And so that is an example of an experience where Oliver was in the driver's seat. He was calling the shots. He was demonstrating or exercising some of his creativity. And, after about 15 minutes, typically he would decide he wanted to move on to something else. That stands in stark contrast to other kinds of technology experiences that he has had and sometimes continues to have, especially when it comes to video games. Video games are designed to keep you playing for as long as possible, to keep you engaged. By the way, so is social media. This is how they make money. And so with games, they introduce certain features, which we call dark patterns. Dark patterns are these features that basically are there to keep you hooked, to keep you engaged. One example I love to use for dark patterns, and kind of the one that I think everybody has probably had experience with, is the autoplay feature on Netflix or YouTube or Hulu. They all have it.
And when you introduced that to myself and my husband, and we thought about some of the applications that our kids use, YouTube being number one, we immediately turned off autoplay. And it seems like, that is sort of how the algorithm gets you, right? Because it has that
Yes,
ability, that pre-built-in ability to give you the same of what you've already watched. And so when you turn that off, you have more control over what comes next, which then lends into the self-directed experience that you were talking about. So yes, if you're
absolutely.
watching this, parents and caregivers, turn off autoplay.
Turn off autoplay. That's an easy one to do, especially if you're using a child account. Like on Netflix, you can have children specific profiles. Just go in, turn off the autoplay, and automatically you'll be making life a lot easier. Because kids, little kids especially, they find transitions very challenging. And
Mm.
autoplay is just one thing that makes the transition that much harder for parents and kids to navigate. And really, and it's a great example of the technology and this one particular design. This is actually serving to co-opt your attention so that you're not really in control. It's controlling your attention for you. So when it comes to games, there are all sorts of dark patterns in games, such as for little kids, there are characters in a game who cry when you exit out or try and exit out of the game. So kids feel really bad and they keep on playing. There are countdown clocks to make you feel this urgency that you have to keep on going and beat the clock. Virtual rewards like badges and points and things like that. Even just how you navigate a game or any platform, just by making it difficult to find your way to the home screen, that
Mhm.
can just keep you in there.
Can I just say,
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt you, but with the design element of these games, I listen to you say that just now, and it just makes me a little sick. Like the designers intentionally, psychologically are like, how can we get this child to stay on here longer and longer and longer? And like including a character that cries just plays on your emotional psyche. And it just seems so wild to me. I mean, it really shouldn't, because psychology is embedded in everything that we do, especially sales. But it's just wild. Like when you really drill down into the detail of what goes into creating these technology platforms and anything, games, everything, it goes really deep.
Oh, yeah. And the funny thing is that a lot of these developers, these tech developers, have advanced degrees in psychology. So they are very aware of how they're manipulating your attention. They're using all those psychological theories to get you to pay attention and to keep you engaged. One thing I do want to say, though, is I'm not saying at all that video games are bad. I let Oliver
Mhm.
play video games. Because the
Mhm.
tricky thing about I mean, there's some video games that I would say don't have a lot of redeeming qualities especially for younger kids. But the other games like Minecraft, I think, is a really good example, or Roblox, where you can create your own games. There's actually a lot of creativity and agency that young people can exert when they're engaged with those games and on those platforms. The tricky thing is that all that good stuff also is side by side all of these design patterns, these design features and dark patterns that keep them engaged. So, they could be having a really great learning experience and very engaged. But then when their parents say, okay, it's time to put that away and go to dinner or have a bath or whatever it is, because they are so engaging, these platforms, it's hard to then transition and leave them. So that's, I think, what is a real struggle for parents. It's a huge struggle for me, is finding that balance. And it's something that I have to renegotiate every day with Oliver, because every day he kind of gets sucked in. And I'm trying to figure out, okay, what's that perfect point where he's had a good experience on this platform, he's been engaged, he's learned some things, he's developed something, he's created something, but now it's kind of tipping into that territory where his eyes are starting to glaze over, and I feel like now we're displacing other activities that he might be doing. And so that's
Mhm.
the kind of balance that I think is super tricky for families. And it's not something that you just get and you have it immediately and it's good for forever.
Yes, and I'm glad you highlighted that, because it's not a one size shoe fits all. It really is
No.
personal, and you have to consider in this whole technology journey with yourself, with your children, you have to do what's best for you and your family. Because I typically don't advocate or allow screen times at the dinner table. That's something that we have set aside for family time. Now, in the summer months, I'm more relaxed with that, but definitely during the school year, it is a no-go zone in our house. Whereas for someone else, they might do that, and that is okay. So a part of kids digital wellness, and a lot of what you are saying as well, Katie, is like we're not saying that it is extremely bad or very, very good. We're offering tools and tips that could help provide a more holistic experience that sort of keeps it balanced, right? So binging Netflix, for 3 days straight is one thing, but in the coming weeks as adults, we may not have any TV, right? Which one is good? Which one is bad? Like, it is up to the household and the family, the caregivers to determine what that would be. I can't believe time is going by so fast.
I know. I was just looking at the clock.
Yeah, it's so many more questions I want to ask you, but I'll say again, I need to dig into the book again, and everyone who's watching, go and get the book. So I'll wrap it up with my last question. And you spoke about it a bit, but when you think about barriers for parents, right, in helping to implement these healthy digital wellness habits, balance is sort of one overarching barrier, but has your research, and have you been able to identify other sort of barriers, or it may not even be considered a barrier. It could just be overlooked as something that could be done or changed to help, provide a more beneficial digital experience in one's household.
Yeah, so I think with parents, I have done research with kids and parents, just to see how it is that they're talking about technology and its role in the home. And one thing that is very clear is that many, if not most parents themselves struggle with regulating and managing and finding balance in their own technology use. And that can cause a lot of guilt on the part of parents. It can also cause a lot of friction, especially with older kids, where they say, well, you're telling me not to use my phone, but look, you're on your phone and you're such a hypocrite. So teens really don't like that, it turns out. But so I think that this is one area where it can be a real challenge, a real barrier for families to come together and figure out a good media plan for their particular family. At the same time, I think it can actually be grounds for finding common ground, especially when you have older teens who are similarly struggling with, managing their phone use and checking their phone all the time. Because you as a parent can say, you know what, I'm also struggling, and let's talk about that. Let's share some of the things that we struggle with. You can even model the struggle yourself and say, you know what, it's not just me as an individual who is weak and, I just can't resist my phone. Actually, these phones have been designed specifically to make them very enticing and engaging, and all of the apps on the phone similarly so. So I actually think that this struggle could be turned into an opportunity for kids and parents to connect and really try to figure these challenges out together.
I agree wholeheartedly. I can still remember maybe 2 years ago, it was 2020, like kind of during the pandemic or just thereafter. And my daughter said to me, Mommy, you're always on your phone. And, during that time, that was sort of unprecedented, right? No one knew what we were doing, work from home and all the things. And, when I sort of studied what she was really saying, right, the emotion behind that, it was that she felt like I was not giving her that attention that is not distracted, right? So we think that, we multitask a lot, phone in hand, we're talking, we're doing it. But our kids, they want that one-on-one interaction where they don't feel like they're second best. And a lot of times that has to do with the phone. So that was a hard lesson for me to learn. But ever since then, I've been talking about that as well. So it's it's really important to consider not just what your kids are saying, but especially the young ones who cannot really articulate the feelings behind what they're saying. We should listen to that as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Katie, is there anything else you would like to leave our audience with today? You said a lot of great things, and I appreciate your time and your expertise.
Yeah, this was great. I think one nugget I'd love to leave your viewers with is this idea of the good enough digital parent. And this is something I talk about in the book. It comes from a pediatrician in the mid 20th century who wrote about the good enough parent. The idea being that, it's not our job as parents, as counter to what we may think, it's actually not our job to be there for our kids 100% of the time. If they have a challenge with a friend, it's not our job always to help them resolve the conflict. If they get stuck with a problem, whether it's homework or something else that they're working on, if we're always there to step in and solve their problems for them, they're not going to have a chance to develop their own resilience. And that really translates well, I think, to the digital context where it's not really our job. And actually, because the technologies are changing so fast and the research is trying to keep up, but it's also changing very fast, we don't have specific answers and specific directions as parents that we can use to say, okay, this is the right decision for my kid. But we can do our best. We can be really tuned in to our kids. And really almost act as scientists, where we are observing our children, how they interact with certain platforms, certain games, certain apps. If we think that that's beneficial to them, we can allow that. If we don't, then we can pivot, change course. And the idea is that we're doing our best. We're inevitably going to make mistakes, both with our children, but also with our own technology use. And the key is to give ourselves a little bit of grace, show ourselves some grace and leeway, and try to learn from our mistakes. And with the confidence that mistakes are fine. It's probably good for our kids to see that we're not perfect, and that good enough can actually be really great.
Absolutely. Yes. Agree wholeheartedly. I think, like you mentioned, the idea of being good enough, is so prevalent in our everyday lives. We're taught, growing up, and what people say about us and how they reinforce us. It all plays into understanding this idea of, am I good enough, which stems from worthiness, right? And so that is transferring into this digital era that we're just, going deeper and deeper in. So thank you for helping us to remember, it's not one size fits all. We do have to understand that we are our kids' role models as well, and helping to be the gatekeeper by putting some of those good digital wellness practices in place. Dr. Katie Davis, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much, Antonia. It's great to be with you.
Thank you. And you are watching another episode of the Digital Deck. Thank you for being here. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Also, hang out with us over at Kids Digital Wellness on Instagram. And if you haven't had a chance to check out the DigiRoo case yet, hop on over to kidsdigitalwellness.com and click on that DigiRoo page and learn how we are helping to transform the way our kids interact with technology with our tool, which is a height adjustable tablet case. Thank you for being here. Until next time.